Bimbo, a derogatory slang term to describe an attractive yet unintelligent woman. We're going to come back to that, but first I want to tell you a story about why I started my company, Autism Expressed. These are my boys. I was a high school autistic support teacher, and I wanted to teach my students how to give feedback to each other. So I taught them the sandwich approach. The sandwich approach is when you start off with something positive, and then you put the critique in the middle. So you tell them what needs to be changed, or you ask probing questions, and then you wrap it all up with something positive that'll motivate them to move forward. So to demonstrate this, I called on Vincent, and I said, Vincent, I want you to critique my dancing, and I pulled out my best moves for him. And Vincent, very dramatic, he said, well, Miss McKeone, looked me up and down, you obviously have rhythm. You could move your feet around a little bit more, but overall, I like your style. I said, great demonstration, and he recognized that I got all this flavor over here. So I called the students up one by one, and I had them demonstrate something that their peers could critique. Lamar was up. Now, Lamar is nonverbal. He also rocks, and he stims. But he's very expressive. And Lamar loves hip-hop. He prefers the West Coast to the East Coast kind. He could tell you the exact year that De La Soul won a hip-hop award. So when Lamar gets up, what does he do? He raps. My nonverbal student raps. And it sounds like this, and it looks like this. And he goes on, and we all listen. Now, at the end of his rap, he threw out a peace sign, and we knew it was over, and we all applauded. And I called on Carlos. I said, Carlos, I want you to critique Lamar's rap using the sandwich approach. So Carlos looked for a minute, and I got a little concerned because people with autism can be very explicit and direct. He could have said something like, Miss McKeone, I don't really know what he said, and I don't really know what to say. So I waited. Carlos turned to the class, and he goes, well, first of all, let's talk about Lamar's lyrics. Were they not great? And I was like, okay. And he went on to say, Lamar could have made more eye contact with his audience, but he had great nonverbal communication. He seemed like he was really into his rap. Perfect. Carlos demonstrated the sandwich approach. But what he did that was even more impressive was he showed empathy for his friend. Now, for a group of people who are classified as having an impairment in socialization or expressive communication, Carlos was now breaking the mold about what a person with autism is supposed to look like. Now, Lamar is also kind of breaking a mold of his own, because when you approach Lamar and he's rocking and he's nonverbal or he's making these utterances that you can't really understand, you might be surprised to know that he has another language under his belt. Lamar could code HTML. Lamar had his own blog and his own website. But you know what? This didn't matter the day that the vocational trainer came to my classroom and was recruiting students for the job training program. He looked at Lamar, and in 30 seconds, he made all types of assumptions about what Lamar would be capable of doing. People like Lamar are being pigeonholed into unemployment and low-wage paying jobs, and it's not fair. And that's why I started my company, because what I realized was that my students had all sorts of abilities. They could be taught so many interesting things, but they're learning to navigate a world. They just don't know the rules yet, and they don't necessarily have the language to express what they think or feel. But guess what? We're all going to be in their shoes at some point in our lives. I certainly am as an entrepreneur. I'm navigating this startup culture. I definitely don't always know the rules, and I definitely don't always have the language to express what I think. Missed a few slides, but this is Lamar, and this is Carlos. So here's a fun fact. It gets a little bit more complicated when you're a female entrepreneur, because before 1988, a woman could not get a business loan without the signature of a man. 1988. That's when the Women's Business Ownership Act was passed. That's almost the 90s. That's Bone Thugs, Britney Spears, the Fugees, Spice Girls, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and Dawson's Creek. So we've come a long way, ladies, but there's still a lot of subconscious stuff going on. This is my friend Stacy. Stacy's an engineer. Stacy was giving a talk about her work with the city of Philadelphia. And when the host introduced her, they said, I met Stacy and Michele at a party last weekend, and they are both excellent dancers. And as you might have already seen, we are pretty good dancers. You saw what I had, my moves up here. So after this talk, a man approached me and he said, Michele, I'd really like to meet Stacy. My son wants to be an engineer, and I'd really like to see what her experience was like. So I said, come on over, I'll introduce you. So Stacy and I reconnected, and we kind of giggled for a moment about being called out for dancing and being good dancers. So the man joined in, and he said, Michele, it's a good thing you're an entrepreneur and Stacy's an engineer. Otherwise, you might have just looked like a couple of dancing bimbos. I'm from Atlantic City. This was my emotional reaction, right? Like, I wanted to take my earrings out, pull my hair back, throw some Vaseline on my face, and just, throw down. But as somebody pointed out, TEDx is very classy. So I pulled the sandwich approach out, and I said, wow, that's a very interesting comment. Maybe you could explain to me what engineers and entrepreneurs are supposed to look like, then Stacy and I can better align our behavior to match that. Well, this man quickly apologized because he knew what he said was inappropriate. The problem was he didn't realize that it was inappropriate until he said it out loud in front of two women. What will be made in the future and who it will be made by will change. And that's why we need to remind people that who's contributing to that future is going to come from all walks of life, whether they're a woman or they're a person with autism. So as you all move forward to continue to make the future, I want to remind you of these two people. I want to remind you to be like Lamar and always stay true to your own voice, even if it doesn't fit the mold or even if it doesn't sound like how everybody else sounds. And then remember Carlos. Have empathy for those who are also trying to find their voice and be expressive. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.